Let's take a look at Russia, its people, and its culture. This is Russia. Of course, this is also Russia. In this country, more than 100 languages are spoken, and Russia spans 11 time zones. Countries are usually not that large, so how did this country become so vast? Hello, welcome to the White Door YouTube channel. As we know, countries exist in all shapes and sizes. First, let's briefly look at the areas of some countries to better understand the expanse of Russia. We have some really small countries, for example, the Vatican City, which is located within Italy and is less than a square kilometer in size, or Monaco in southern France, which has an area of just 2 square kilometers, truly tiny, even smaller than many cities. Now, let's look at a more average-sized country like the Netherlands, with an area of about 40,000 square kilometers, or a larger country like Iraq, with an area of 440,000 square kilometers. In the United States, there are states larger than Iraq, such as Texas, with an area of 695,000 square kilometers. The total area of the United States is over 9.5 million square kilometers. So there are countries of various sizes. Canada is the second largest country on Earth. Now, let's take a look at the expanse of the largest country on Earth, Russia. It is truly vast. Its area is about twice that of the United States at 17 million square kilometers, constituting 1/8 of the world's inhabited land area. 24% of Russia is located in Europe, and a large portion of the country's population resides in this region. Not only does Russia share a coastline with Turkey, but it also has extensive borders with China and North Korea on the Asian side. If we continue, we see that Russia extends to such an extent that from that point, it is easy to travel from Russia to America if it were possible to swim 3,700 meters. Therefore, Russia is remarkably vast. However, in the not-so-distant past, this country was not large at all. In fact, compared to empires and their borders, Russia was quite small and hardly noticeable. This is a story that I want to tell you. 1,000 years ago, Russia appeared in this way. An ununified group of Russian and Slavic peoples, who were a relatively successful and growing society in Eastern Europe, gathered around the city of Kiev, which is also called the Kievan Rus state. However, they had a major weakness. They had vast plains that made it very easy for any army looking to raid new lands to pass through. This is exactly what a group of horse-riding warriors did. These individuals were Mongols, who used this flat route to pass through Asia and expand their empire. A vast number of Mongol horsemen, after occupying vast territories in Asia, eventually reached the Slavic and Kievan Rus peoples. Nonetheless, the Mongols gained dominance over this small population of Slavic peoples and weakened the rapidly growing society. All the cities of the Kievan Rus, which somewhat engaged in trade and cooperation with each other, fell apart, and now they were paying tribute and taxes to the Mongols. There was a very distant empire in that part of the world. After about a century or two, there was a city prepared to fight the Mongols in the region. They quietly became more powerful from the early 14th century. This city was called Moscow, or Muscovy. Moscow had become the sole center for collecting tributes and taxes for the Mongol rulers, and was also recognized as the center of the European fur trade that had become fashionable. Moscow was also in the process of learning how to use gunpowder and weapons and technology from Europe in these years, when the Mongols had built one of the greatest empires in history. Although they had skilled and fearsome horseback warriors, maintaining the unity of these lands for a long time seemed very difficult. During the years of its growth and development in the 14th century, the Mongol Empire began to break apart, and Moscow was prepared to take advantage of this opportunity. Soon, they were able to easily tackle the Mongols, who really had a vast empire, and therefore keeping it was very difficult. They had sold the tribute furs, and they also had weapons and gunpowder. Over the years and after several battles, Ivan III, the ruler of Moscow, freed the Russians from the rule of the Mongols and Tatars in 1480 AD and succeeded in driving them out, prepared to expand eastward. Moscow, a city that was soon to become the Russian Empire, was in the process of learning that we will not allow anyone to attack our land again in the way the Mongols attacked us. They believed that the only way to keep their land safe from invading enemies was to use natural boundaries such as mountains and rivers to protect themselves. So they started expanding towards these mountains. Moscow has now turned into the Russian Empire, and soon they are like an empire with a collection of borders and several mountain ranges for protection. They have good trade, technology, and economy. Things looked good for Russia, but wait a moment. Can we overlook the green strip on the map that shows smooth grassland highways, the same route that the Mongols used for attack? A direct path towards Moscow as a result of this flaw in the Russian plan and their small empires and pseudo-empires still exists. They are still looking for a natural boundary, a sea or something else, to protect their country from the east. It is the mid-15th century AD, and in these circumstances, this tyrannical and fearsome man rises to power in Moscow. The first Tsar of Russia, named Ivan the Terrible, has grand ambitions for the expansion of Russia. He believed that we do not need to stop behind these mountains. Let's see how far we can expand eastward behind these mountains. On the other side of the mountains is a land of ice with very few inhabitants, known as Siberia. In many of these areas, due to severe cold, there are not many people living except for the resistance of the Mongol and Tatar Khans in some areas who resisted against the Russians. The rest of the inhabitants in those lands did not show much resistance against the Russian occupation. The main enemy of the Russians was the cold and frost, but in this cold, there was a blessing for the Russians. Animals that had valuable furs and thick skins, which were very expensive and popular in the European market. This fur trade turned into fuel for the Russian occupation competition until the expansion towards the east continued. The czars and rulers continued these occupations repeatedly for several years until they eventually reached the Pacific Ocean. It's very far from the original starting point in Moscow, but they did not settle for just that and continued on their way. When the Russians encountered tribes and people who were far from Moscow, they were very different from them. It's strange that, unlike many colonizers of the world, the Russians tried to negotiate with those tribes and convince them to join the Russian Empire. If the people of those regions resisted, they faced ruthless and brutal suppression by the Russians. But many tribes did not resist and thought it was in their favor to be part of this growing empire. As a result, this empire grew without much conflict, and in the process, preserved many of their cultures, identities, and languages as very different from the culture of Moscow, which is why Russia today is very large. But it might be better to look at it this way. Russia today is divided into 85 territories, 21 of which are actually called republics. They have their official language, their own parliament, and are completely independent of Russia except in international affairs. It's as if 21 countries are placed within one country, all with their unique style and differences. Well, the Russia that we know is like this, but there are other versions of Russia. Let's take a look at a few of them together. First, let's look at the Republic of Yakutia, also known as Sakha. It is located in the east. It is large and almost twice the size of Iran. This land is situated in a time zone 6 hours ahead of Moscow. The people here are nothing like Putin at all. Their ancestors are not from the Moscow region and speak the North Siberian Turkic language. The capital of this republic is here, the coldest large city on earth, with an average temperature of -8 degrees Celsius throughout the year. This whole region is full of these gigantic holes. They search for diamonds in these holes, and 25% of the world's diamonds are extracted in this republic. The next stop is the Republic of Dagestan, next to the Caspian Sea, which shares borders with the countries of Azerbaijan and Georgia. The climate here is very different from what we think about Russia. The weather is hot and dry, and besides the Russian, people speak 13 different languages here. 83% of the people here are Muslim, and many people don't think that there are so many Muslims in Russia. The last thing we want to talk about is the Tuva Republic in southern Russia, located north of Mongolia. Tuva is another part of Russia where the Russian ethnicity and language are in the minority. People here are more related to Mongolians and speak a Turkic language called Tuvan. As we have seen, Russia, like a puzzle, has become great, with diverse cultures and languages. They were looking for new borders, like fur and animal skins, for trade, and continued to expand their empire. Russia encompasses all ethnicities and cultures along with it. As you know, history is very complex, and in this video, we could only have a short and superficial review of the history of Russia. In other episodes, I will delve into the distant and near history of Russia. If you find a topic interesting, please write in the comments, and thank you for watching this video. And finally, I'm Yangi.